Hello, welcome to Dictation. This is Level D, Lesson 4. It's called Batty in the Dark. Bye, Rosa waved as the white van backed slowly out of its parking place. Have a good time. Yeah, don't drive the bats, Batty, Daniel yelled, and watch out for cave monsters. We won't have to worry about any monsters in the cave today, Caitlin called. We won't have to worry about any monsters in the cave today, Caitlin called back from the open van window. 'Cause you're not going with us. Mrs. Burton and the kids' teacher walked over to the van and spoke with her husband for a minute before he drove off with 8 excited students. Have you ever been in a cave? Setsuko bounced on the seat beside Caitlin. Well, our family went to a cave once when we were on vacation. Caitlin bent down and pulled up one of her socks. It was a big cave where a guide leads the group and tells you stuff. They turned out the lights so we could see how total darkness feels. That kind of scared me, but I was little. Total darkness, Christopher repeated to himself. He flipped his flashlight on. Is it getting dim? What are you doing, Christopher? Tony leaned across Thorny to thump Christopher's knee. You better save your batteries for the cave. He sat back and held up his own big flashlight. My mama gave me brand new batteries this morning and the new bulb, so I'll be able to see everything. I want to see some stagnites and stagtites. I presume you're referring to stalagmites and stalactites, Thorny continued without waiting for Tony's answer. It's highly unlikely that we see any prime examples of these delicate formations in a cave such as the one we're visiting today. It is my understanding that many of these calcium carbonate deposits have been removed or damaged by thoughtless amateurs. Whoa, Tony thumped Thorny this time. Hold it. What are you talking about? He shook his head. Don't try and explain it. Isn't it great that Mr. Burton is taking us caving? Spelunking, Thorny corrected. Whatever. I'm just glad I got to be in the first group. It's gonna be fun. Can you guys believe Lainey? She doesn't want to go. He shook his head in amazement. She can't stand getting dirty, Tony mimicked. Christopher kicked at his backpack of clean clothes. It's not like we'll be dirty all the way home. Tony laughed. Who cares if we're covered with dirt in the cave? It'll be too dark to see. Yeah, too dark to see. Christopher repeated weakly. Total darkness. He patted his flashlight. We appear to have arrived. Thorny pointed to the sign that welcomed them to Willowwood State Park. A ranger dressed in dark green pants and khaki shirt climbed into the front seat with Mr. Burton. Mr. Burton didn't have to raise his voice to get the kids' attention.
This is Mr. Davis. He'll be guiding us through the cave. Now, will we drive over to the entrance? Mr. Davis will tell you about Whispering Winds Cave.
I don't know if he talked like that, but this one. Mr. Davis told them how the cave had been formed by an underground river. He said that the cave contained several chambers and passageways. Native American tribes had used the room nearest the entrance for shelter. Later, robbers had hidden there. He explained that Whispering Winds Cave was home to bats and told them what to do when they saw one. You guys should Google and see if Whispering Winds Cave in Willowwood State Park is actually a real place. Anyways, the van arrived at the trail leading to the cave while he was still outlining safety rules. So remember, I'll lead and Mr. Burton will bring up the rear. Always keep track of the person behind you and keep your head down. Many of these passageways are narrow and low. Watch where you're going so you don't bump your head and pay attention to where you are. I'm going to step next. Any questions? Caitlin spoke up. What happens if we get lost in there? Mr. Davis smiled reassuringly. Oh, we've never lost anybody in this cave. His expression turned serious. If you do find yourself separated from the group, just sit tight exactly where you are and we'll come to you. Everyone got that? Let's go have fun. The first passageway was tight and even the children had to crawl. Christopher wasn't sure he liked spelunking after all. He kept Tony's feet in sight and checked behind him often for Thorny's bobbing light. But the first big room they entered was worth it. Mr. Davis gathered everyone in the center and flashed his powerful beams toward the ceiling. The dome of rock was 30 feet above them and had icicles like stalactites pointing down. Thorny was fascinated and kept asking Mr. Davis questions. Finally, Mr. Burton suggested they see what else the cave had to offer. Christopher was getting used to the darkness. As they headed out, he kept sight of Tony, especially when they reached the really twisty, turny section of passages, with the light bouncing off the rock walls and boulders. It was hard to tell which way to go. Then Christopher looked up and couldn't see Tony. Light from Tony's flashlight was shining over the large boulder wedged in the main passageway in front of him. But which way should he go to get to the other side of that boulder? Christopher bounced back and forth. There's a passage right on the other side that looks like it goes through to the other side, but it's low and narrow and I'd have to crawl. This passage on the left is big enough to walk through, but it kind of looks like it heads away from the boulder. What am I going to do? Tony's light was fading. He had to act quickly. Since Tony got through there so fast, he must have taken the passage to the left. Christopher glanced behind him to make sure Tony Thornton Christopher glanced to the left to make sure Thorny's light was coming. Then he turned left. He couldn't tell if he'd taken the right way. He kept hearing voices and seeing flashes of light that he thought were still ahead of him. When he went quite a way before he was sure he'd taken the wrong turn. There was no more streaks of light bouncing off the rocks and no voices. He stopped and looked around. From where he was standing, passageways split off in 4 directions. I don't even know which cave I came through to get here. If I go just a little ways down each direction, I should be able to tell. Christopher's heart thumped loudly. But how will I know how to get back here if it's the wrong passage? I'll lay my flashlight on the ground pointing towards the passage I go into so I can see a little way. If it's the wrong one, I'll just go back to my flashlight. Carefully placing the flashlight on the cave floor, Christopher started down the first passage. He was feeling pretty good about his plan when there was a crash behind him and his light went out. Help! Is anybody there? Yes, Thorny's voice carried through the darkness. But I don't know exactly where there is. Christopher felt a rush of relief. Thorny, turn your light on so I can see how to get back to you. I would like to assist you, Thorny sounded strange. However, I'm unable to do so at this time. My flashlight is presently at some unknown location. When I tripped and fell, it flew out of my hand. I do have your flashlight here. Unfortunately, it appears to have suffered damages when I landed on it. Silence for several long minutes. Christopher! Thorny cleared his throat. I was not aware of it before this precise moment, but his voice rose to a panic squeak. I believe I'm suffering claustrophobia! It's okay, Thorny. Christopher tried to calm his own panic. We'll be all right if we just stay put. Mr. Burton will find us. But Christopher, Thorny's voice sounded squeezed out of him. I hate to admit it, but I feel like the walls are tightening around us each second. Don't you feel it? No, but I don't exactly like the dark, Christopher admitted. You're afraid of the dark? Christopher could hear scraping sounds as Thorny jumped up and moved restlessly around. What are we going to do? We're going to stay exactly where we are, like Mr. Davis said. Christopher tried to keep his voice from shaking. And we'll pray, of course. Christopher closed his eyes tightly to keep out the darkness around him and bowed his head. Dear God, we're lost, but you know where we are. Help is not to be afraid. Help us not to be afraid, and help it not to be too long till someone finds us. Christopher Thorny! Mr. Burton's voice bounced around the rocks. A light flashed through the darkness. We're here! Thorny shouted. Right here, Mr. Burton! Christopher stumbled toward the light. When he got back to Thorny, Mr. Burton had arrived. Christopher grinned straight into the powerful spelunking light attached to Mr. Burton's helmet. God sure answered that prayer fast. Mr. Burton squeezed each boy's shoulder. Well, let's thank him before we join the others. He bowed his head, and Christopher watched the light dance around the cave floor where Mr. Burton prayed. Loving Father in heaven, thank you for guiding me to these boys. Quickly, thank you for caring for them and protecting them. Help them to see that you are the light of the world. Help them to always remember that we can trust you to show us the way we should go every day. On the way home, Christopher was almost asleep when Thorny asked, Christopher, I was wondering, what made you think of praying? Well, God's always there to help whenever we ask him to. Christopher yawned, and we needed help. He flicked the switch on his flashlight and nothing happened. I'm glad we can follow God's light and not worry about it going out like this flashlight, because I really don't like stumbling around in the dark. All right, it is time for dictation. So if you could turn to page 27 in your spelling packet. And number 1 starts with a capital P. Are you ready? Here we go. Capital P. Please behave when you are in the cave. It's a nice little rhyme. Please behave when you are in the cave. Please behave when you are in the cave. And don't forget the punctuation at the end. Number 2. I believe at last. Start over. I believe at least one chief lived here. I believe at least one chief lived here. I believe at least one chief lived here. And the last one, number 3. He did not know what became of his light. He did not know what became of his light. And the last time through, he did not know what became of his light. And don't forget the punctuation. And you guys can do the proofreading on your own. Thank you and have a nice day.